Folks, we're on location today here up Hewlett Canyon at Bayou Butte. And behind me is the three red hills that we talked about in our last story. Bayou Butte on my left, and our pit mine is behind me. Our story today is a continuation of the saga between Bob Garman, the author of this book, and the information which comes from this book, and the Tumlinsons, which two people couldn't be more diametrically opposed in their beliefs than Bob and Travis. Case in point of how things become convoluted, I'd like to start with a story that initiated the hunt for the Lost Dutchman gold mine. In 1895, P.C. Bicknell wrote a story for the San Francisco Chronicle in which he made the following statements. Said Jacob Waltz went to Mexico to avoid military service and became intimately friends with the Peralta family, and the Peraltas sold him the information to find the Lost Dutchman gold mine for a pittance. He left Mexico and came up to Tucson and picked up his partner, Jacob Weiser, and using the information supplied by the Peraltas, found the gold mine. Now, in 1953, Sims Ely wrote a book, and he obviously was using this information from P.C. Bicknell. But this is the way it came out. Jacob Waltz went to Mexico. He saved Peralta's life in a bar fight. And when Peralta found out that he and Weiser, who was now with him instead of picking him up in Tucson, were Confederate veterans, he gave him a map to find the Lost Dutchman gold mine. Now, I would really have loved to have read Sims Ely's book before it got published, because his son was working with the publisher at the end and letters were flying back and forth. Steve Bowitzer cleared this up in an unpublished book that he published himself and sent to me, where the publisher was hounding Sims the whole time because he wanted the book to be able to be sold. He wanted sales, and he didn't care about anything else. And Sims' son got so tired of the communications flying back and forth that he finally just turned it over to the publisher. And the publisher edited out a third of the book. And this is where all this misinformation came from about being Confederate veterans and all this kind of stuff, because this man wanted to sell books. And I often wonder if an awful lot of books that have been written and newspaper stories were not exactly the same thing. Now, which of these stories is true? Both of them obviously cannot be true. In Bob Garman's book, though, he is quoted as saying that the Peraltas came from the state of Sonora, the town of Santa Fe, up to Queen Valley, where there was permanent water. Well, it didn't take much of an effort to find out that there is a town called Santa Fe in the state of Sonora, down by Hermosillo. But it also didn't take much effort to find out there are 24 Santa Fe's in Old Mexico. Now, Travis had a different concept. Travis believed that the Peraltas came from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and buried a treasure that he brought with him in the Superstitions and attempted to leave with gold ore and was massacred by the Apache Indians. Well, I just took a little bit of research to find out that indeed there was a Don Pedro Peralta who was the governor of New Mexico, and He was only governor for 1 year, and the leader of the Catholic Church had him arrested because there was the old continuing fight over who had the authority, the church or the state. He was in prison for a year. Then he was sent to Mexico City to stand an inquisition. He was exonerated in that inquisition and was sent to Guaymas, Old Mexico, in a government job where he met his wife. Well, it's a bit of a stretch to find a Peralta who was governor of Mexico in 1609 and only was governor until 1610, who was not married and had no progeny left in New Mexico, and once cleared in the Inquisition, never returned to New Mexico. Now, which of these stories is true? Which one are you going to stake your life and reputation on going and searching in for the Lost Dutchman Mine in the Superstition Mountains? But when you take into account the story of James Addison Rebus, who was the Baron of Arizona and was absolutely proven beyond any reasonable doubt that he made up the entire family of the Peraltas to show that his wife was heir to a Spanish grant, which turned out to be a complete hoax. Which of these stories is true? Which one are you going to believe? Which one are you going to stake your life and reputation and money on going looking for the Lost Dutchman Mine in the Superstition Mountains? It can't be that they're all true, but it could be that they're all false. Now, to further substantiate Travis's claim that the stuff came from New Mexico, whatever it was, it's claimed that in 1846, when General Kearny was going to California during the beginning of the Mexican War, and he was coming into Santa Fe, the current governor in 1846, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name because it doesn't sound anything like what it looks like. There was two trains of thought about what he did. One of the trains of thought was that, like in Tucson, when the Mormon battalion come through, the Mexicans just stepped out of the way, the military that they had. The other side of that story was that he had 3,000 soldiers, and he met Kearny at Glorieta Pass, which was rumored to only be 40 yards wide. And with 3,000 soldiers to Kearny's 150 mounted dragoons, Kearny convinced him to step out of the way. Now, which of those stories are you going to believe? I don't know. But whatever it was the governor in 1846 took with him when he stepped out of the way, he brought back with him when Kearny went on to California. There's absolutely no substantiation of any kind that any kind of treasure came out of New Mexico, Santa Fe, to the Superstition Mountains. Now, it turns out Bob Garman was the guide for the Tumlinsons. Now, it turns out when Garman met the Tumlinsons, well, by accident, I should say, in 1952, and learned what it was that they were seeking, and that being they were investigating all of the canyons east of Miner's Needle, south to Queen Creek. He became their guide, and he led them through the Superstition Mountains for the next 10 years. You would think that working with these Tumlinsons for 10 years as a guide, you would think that some kind of agreement would have been made between Garman and the Tumlinsons about sharing and anything that they found. Now, Garman was more of a prospector than a treasure hunter, and Tumlinson was more of a treasure hunter than a prospector. So it turned out to be a a wonderful association here. And I am certain that I hope I can convince you that the influence that Garman had on the Tumlinsons and his knowledge of the area probably influenced them to be in the area where they found what they found. I'm going to show a picture here of Tumlinson and his uncle on his mother's side, studying over a map that you can't see any detail to until you blow it up some. Bob Garman took this picture and it ended up in the hands of Tom Collenborn and others. And on this map, when it's blown up, you can clearly see the letter F over on the right side, which is on the stone maps and the paper map that belonged to his grandfather, Peg-Leg Pete Tumlinson. Studying this blow up of this paper map, which you can see the edges are irregular, the map is very old and beat up. You can clearly see the letter F on the right-hand upper portion of the map, as you see on the montage here with the stone maps. But you also can see the complete difference of the information on the paper map that was left off of the stone maps. And this misinformation that Travis had about the treasure coming from Santa Fe, New Mexico, obviously influenced him to manufacture the stone maps about the horse map and the witch map, better known as the priest map. Now I'm going to show you a video here given by Jack Sanfelice. And I'll take up the story after you see this part of the video.
So they're trying to get investors. And the more discoveries that they make that are in the newspaper, like I said, I found over 50 articles and all these mining claims. So they set up these 5 separate companies. So if they wanted to sell off one property, they could do it and still maintain control. And that basically is what they did over a long period of time there. They set up areas at the areas, they called it the Randolph, and that was right below Rogers. They called another one the Maverick, which was in Millside Canyon, and the Peacock, which was west of that, and another major company. And then they set across the street from the mill site, they set up the Robles. Now, interesting thing about the Robles mining area. The Robles mining area had high-grade copper. And it was easy to find because they were told, look for the red hills. And if you ever been up Hewitt Canyon and looked over to your right, you will see the residue, I'll say, of the Woodburys when they were there in the early 1900s and people who was there in the 1940s, et cetera. And they had found a primary mine there on the Robles thing, and it was a gold mine. So they mined gold and high-grade silver out of it. Some of the mines that they found or encountered were very, very rich. And in several of these locations, they had found gold. Some places they only dug down so far. Some they went as far as 400 or 500 feet. But they had to have money.
So anyway, now that we've seen that video about the Woodburys and the Three Red Hills and the gold mine they had there, one of the Woodburys was sent to Los Angeles with $75,000 in gold to drum up some financial support for the development of the Three Red Hills area. But he came back absolutely, totally broke and with no help whatsoever, and they were unable to expand their operation in the Three Red Hills. But here we have a map that shows the Woodbury operation of 4 mines up in Woodbury Valley. This is south of Rogers Ridge, the Woodbury Valley, and where the 4 mines they had was located on the slopes of the ridge. But one is way down here, a mine at Bayous Butte. The little hill you see with the little marks around it, this is the dominant pointed peak that I often refer to in the Lost Lagoon story. This is the peak, the pointed peak that's on Hewlett Ridge between Millsite Canyon and Hewlett Canyon, where the 3 Red Hills are. And this is this one little curve here, where is to the right of the pointed peak, is the very canyon that the film crew from Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains went up into the pit mine, the Mullinses, which was in 1958, that he took my dad and me up there with himself and what I believe to be his brother Jesse. Now, it never tumbled to me. I always assumed it was his brother Jesse. But now I want to show you this picture that we've used before of Mullins, Bob Garman, and Jesse, who is an extremely tall fellow. And it never tumbled to me that the guy that was with Hart Mullins in 1958 could not have been Jesse, because he was the same height as Mullins. So now I'm convinced that I was actually taken up there by Hart Mullins and Bob Garman, who said very little during the whole discussion. It was Mullins that was doing all the talking, but I thought it was interesting that I tumbled to this after all these years. So here we have all these different stories, which is impossible for all of them to be true, all winding up at the 3 Red Hills, which I believe the map that they were using that belonged to their grandfather, Peg Leg Pete, had absolutely nothing to do with what they found. That the influence of Bob Garman and his knowledge of the area ended them up over in the 3 Red Hills, where they did discover something that was more or less had to do with the Woodbury mining operation. But I don't know. I don't think anybody knows exactly what they found. And I just got to leave it there as another mystery of the Superstition Mountains.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.